Hey everyone, how you doing today? All right. Um, Currently, I'm going through the book of Samuel, the first book of Samuel, and it's wonderfully refreshing compared to the book of Judges, thankfully. So it's off to a much better start here. Let me bring it over. All right, so here we go. I'll just jump right in. I'm not going to explain the entire book. By all means, definitely go read it for yourself. It's turning out, like I said, much better than Judges. I can't take any more violence. I need something a little softer. So here we go. We'll jump right in, right? I can see it. I think. Okay, perfect. Samuel. So essentially, his mother had problems conceiving. The Lord, granted her a child. At least this is the first child. It was Samuel. He's dedicated to the Lord from birth. So his entire life is going to take basically the Nazarite, vow. It's going to be holy, walk the ways of the Lord, and not be a greedy, person who falls into the ways of this world. Right? He's not supposed to live like this world. He's supposed to live for God. Very, very different. So here we go. When Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. Yeah, so essentially Samuel was a prophet. Like I said, he walked in the ways of the Lord. He was in the Lord's good sight. But he was also a judge, right? He was a prophet and a judge. So I guess he was becoming old, and he has his kids, right? He's going to do like a hereditary thing where he's going to let his kids take over just because he walked in the ways of the Lord. It was basically the assumption that, okay, his kids will be exactly the same, right? They'll be just like him. Um, So he became old, and he was going to make his sons judges over Israel. He's getting old. He's basically passing the torch over. The name of his firstborn son was Joel, and the name of his second, Abijah. I don't know if I pronounced that right. They were judges in Beersheba. Yet his sons did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice. So you will probably see that this, like in today's society, in this world, right, currently, 2023, you see this all the time. You'll have leaders that they don't even walk in the ways of the Lord, right? They walk in the ways of personal gain. So they sit up there in their office, PMs, presidents, whatever you want to call them, whatever term you want to give them. They're your leaders, right? They sit up there and they make themselves filthy rich. They have all the access, they have all the power. They sit up there on top looking down, basically, crapping on everyone else. Um, they have all the money. They take lavish vacations. They don't want for anything. They have everything they want. And they can sit back and they can, their income is taken care of. They have whatever income they make, and then they extort and bribe other ways. They get money elsewhere. But they have plenty of money. They have all the security in the world. They can take all the lavish vacations they want to take. Their fridge is full. They don't have to worry about retirement. They have security. They have everything, right? They get waited on hand and foot. They have entire squads of people that follow them around, right? Security and making sure they get everywhere. They never have to drive, right? They're too good. They can't even drive their own vehicle. They have to have people drive them. So they get escorted out, they get the red carpet put out, they get to walk out, and all the cameras are all over the place, and everyone's so happy to see them. And everyone grovels at their feet, right? This is our leader. We want to see them, Oh, they're going to come here and they're going to talk. So they get puffed up, right? Because of all this treatment, they get puffed up and their pride gets out of control. And they have all the money they could want, and then the greed takes over and it just corrupts them, right? If they got into office for the right reasons because they wanted to serve people, right? Big if. But because of the way that leaders are perceived in society today, I would guess that a lot of them don't actually get in there for that reason. They get in there because they realize it's a sweet gig, right? It's a sweet gig. You're going to get in there. You're going to get to appoint your friends and family and people you like. You'll get to create your own little kingdom, right? You get to pick whoever you want. And that gets to be your little kingdom. And they're going to support you over the people, right? It's like a triangle, right? You got the one little person at the top, or probably in this scenario, right? We'll say like presidents and PMs, whatever. One little person at the top. And then they get to appoint their little tight circle, right? The very top of the triangle there. Their little friends, their family, people they like, people that support them. They create their own little, own little kingdom. And then all the people at the bottom are just getting crapped on, right? They get nothing. Like the people at the bottom are starving. They don't have access to education. They're in like war torn countries, things like that. So they're getting treated terribly. While the people at the top are sitting there enjoying their lavish dinners, luxury vacations. This leader gets to hang out with these leaders, and they all get to sit around at their beautiful tables and their luxurious mansions and palaces. And, you know, they get treated like kings and queens while the people in their country starve to death and try to find water, you know, and get attacked by other people that are upset in their kingdom because they're also poor and, not doing well. So it's very, very dangerous, the system we have, and it's all because of greed, right? It's one of our biggest sins that we fall into is greed. And then because of the treatment, the way they're treated, their pride gets out of control, right? Because they're treated like royalty. They're treated like kings and queens for as long as they're in there. After they fight and scrap and do whatever they have to do to get in those positions, right? So morally, some of them are bankrupt. All they care about is money, and they will snipe and stick and bash anybody they have to get where they want to be, which is at the top, to get their little kingdom. And then once they get up there, they just sit around and they get lured in by the luxurious treatment, right? The greed takes over, and then they'll do whatever they have to do. And then they fight with other little kings, right? Other little kings in other little places in the world. So you have all these kings, right, who are just basically engorged in greed, and then they fight with other little kings around the world. So it's just a horrible system. But back to Samuel. So Samuel was a good guy, prophet, did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, was called by the Lord as he was a child, took over from Eli. But his sons, the assumption was a hereditary thing, right? His sons would take over. But his sons did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after gain. So his sons were greedy, right? He was probably, everyone knew who he was. He was famous. He was popular. People liked him. So for whatever reason, his sons didn't walk in his ways, and they wanted money. They wanted gain. They were greedy. Even says here, they took bribes and perverted justice. So his sons were not right in the eyes of the Lord. So they didn't deserve that position. They were taking bribes and perverting justice. They were kind of like the politicians that I'm used to and the ones that I see when I watch the news, All they care about is money and fame and power and all the little luxurious treats that you get because of that, and how people grovel at your feet and make you feel important. They wanted all of that. So those are exactly the type of people you do not want in power. You put people like that in power, and you're going to have a broken country with people that are, literally broken down mentally because they sit back and they wonder how this person all the way at the top can sit there and have this wonderful, luxurious life and vacations and go all over the world, wherever they want to go. They can do whatever they want. People grovel at their feet while they're sitting at the bottom, right? Underneath that king's military, right? The king has the military, king or queen. They're up top. They have the military below them to kind of fight off all those little people at the bottom of the pyramid that decide they want to speak up. So, yeah, it's kind of a horrible system, and it's all because of greed, right? And pride and vanity sometimes. So it's horrible, but it's all because of sin. And if you have the wrong type of leader in power and they're governed by sin, not by God's direction, then you're going to have the situation that we live in right now. Look around. Look at your leaders. Do you really think that your leaders are there to serve you, right? In the pyramid? Let's say you're in the middle, upper tier, lower tier, all the way at the bottom. Who knows? Who knows where you are in the pyramid? But let's say you're in that pyramid and you're not in the very top, right? You're not at the top, and you're not in that little top pyramid, right? So you have the big pyramid, right? And then you got that little pyramid at the top, the little kingdom up there created by the king or queen. So all the people that the king or queen is actually friendly with, or that owe them favors, things like that will do their bidding. Either out of fear or out of respect, one or the other, doesn't matter. But typically in that top pyramid, that's all greed, right? Because they're doing well up there, and they kind of scratch each other's backs so that they can get what they want, so they can stay in power, right? So you have all of them up top in that little baby pyramid up top, a little pyramid of greed up there, and then everyone else down here. And, they could be greedy too, but you get the point. But that's why he didn't want his sons to take over, right? Because they didn't walk in his ways. He was thinking he would do it just because they were sons, but they weren't the best choice. Morally, they were not right in God's eyes. So we'll keep going on here. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, Behold, you are old and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the nations. Right? So they weren't happy with Samuel, even though Samuel was doing a good job. He was a prophet. He walked in the ways of the Lord. The Lord, anointed him. He was the one, right? That wasn't good enough. So they wanted a king to judge us like all the other nations. So because other nations had kings, they wanted a king. Even though they had a prophet, things were going well, that wasn't good enough. They wanted more. They wanted a king. They wanted to be like everybody else, right? God had set them up with Samuel, who was a good person, of good moral character, but that wasn't good enough. They wanted to be like everyone else. They weren't happy being what God wanted them to be, right? God wanted them in the situation they were in, which is why he gave them Samuel. But it wasn't good enough. They wanted more. They wanted to have a king like everybody else had a king, so they wanted to have a king. They didn't want to be different for God because that's what God wanted. It wasn't good enough. They're like, no, God, sorry. We see your plan, but we're just not feeling it. We'd rather go ahead and have a king because other people have them. So if other people do it, why shouldn't we, right? But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us, instead of his sons, which he thought would be good judges, but they weren't. So they said, give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed to the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, well, and an aside, I guess if his sons were morally okay, then this wouldn't have been an issue. But, it is what it is. Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, obey the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. So in this scenario, as always, right, God is king. If I even hate the term, just because of how kings are viewed here on this planet. So because of how kings are viewed here, kings and queens, because of how royalty, kings and queens are viewed here, I don't even like the term. But essentially, God is king over all. King, whatever. It's not really a sex, but you know what I mean. So we'll keep it simple. We'll keep it with the scripture. So God is king, right? And Samuel was the representative here to show God's will to the people, right? That's how it was set up. So he's saying, Samuel, don't worry. They haven't rejected you. They've rejected God, because God set them up with Samuel as their representative, right? As their prophet or their judge, however you want to look at that. But it wasn't good enough. They wanted a king. So God's saying, hey, don't worry about it. If they want a king, give them a king, right? Because God already knows how it's going to work out. God's level of intelligence is something that we can't fathom, right? We couldn't fathom a God that could sit back and know what's going to happen thousands of years from now, based on everyone's little decisions that are happening right now, and how that would interweave with other decisions of all the other people, right? And everything, and how it all weaves together as if time doesn't matter, because to God it doesn't. But we can't understand that level of intelligence. We think artificial intelligence is impressive. It's nothing. It's comical compared to God's intelligence. AI is nothing. To us, it's amazing, right? It's amazing, right? I mean, think about it. If you went back in time and you handed a caveman a MacBook and an iPhone, cell phone, imagine how amazing that would look, right? They're like, oh my goodness, they wouldn't even know how to use it, right? That's like us trying to understand God's intelligence. God's level of intelligence and interpretation of time is nothing we can fathom, which is why when Christ comes, it's in human form, right? Otherwise, we'd have no way to understand it. It just wouldn't make sense. So, yeah, just keep that in mind. So here we go. So basically, yeah, don't worry about it, Samuel. It's not your fault. They're just being stupid. Give them what they want. Okay. According to all the deeds they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt, even to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are also doing to you. He's basically saying, look, these Israelites, these Hebrews, brought them up out of Egypt, out of slavery, out of the worst conditions possible. They weren't happy then, They were very unhappy the entire time. They sat around grumbling. They weren't happy with the manna. They're never happy, right? And then they were still serving other gods, Baal and Asherah and all these other gods, right? That they were serving Moloch, all these other gods that they were in that time, right? At least Baal. So all the other little fake gods that were going around, principalities, they were serving, even though God is the one that saved them out of Egypt from slavery. They were grumbling the whole time, still, worshiping other gods, still falling out. So they're doing to you. So basically, God's not surprised. God's like, look, they're turning on you just like they turned on me, even after saving them, right? It is what it is. We're slow to learn sometimes. It's unfortunate. Now then, obey their voice. Only you shall solemnly warn them and show them the ways of the king who shall reign over them. So God's sitting back, not throwing his hands up in the air because he already knows how it's going to work out, but saying, look, free will. This is what they want, right? They have free will. That's what they want. Give it to them. But he's saying, obey their voice, right? Give it to them. Only you shall solemnly warn them and show them the ways of the king who shall reign over them. So he's basically saying, give them what they want, but I want you to sit them down and I want you to warn them of what's coming. And then I want you to give them what they want, even though it's going to hurt them. There we go. Samuel's warning against kings. This part's lovely. If you haven't read the book of Samuel, definitely go do it. I mean, if you made it through Judges, you're probably a little worn out, not feeling so great about the human race. But definitely jump over to Samuel. It's going much better, right? And then we'll get into the Davidic reign. But here we go. So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking for a king for him. He said, these will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. Contemporary times, king or queen, but, thousands of years ago. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots and to be his horsemen and to run before his chariots, the king's chariots. And he will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and some to plow his ground and to reap his harvest, and to make his implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. So basically, he'll send your sons and daughters into war. They'll fight for the king, right? He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. All right, that's very sexist. Females did not have the rights they should have had back then. Actually, it was quite terrible for females, their position in the world. So those days are done. But, we're going off the scripture, right? This is the Old Testament, not to the New Testament yet, and it's definitely not to the Final Testament. You're living through that one. But he'll take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. So basically, everyone's going to work for the king or queen in their little tight circle of friends that they have, right? So basically, we'll just all work for the king. That's how it's going to work out. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to his servants. And his servants are just people working for him, right? It's like the triangle. And then you've got the little triangle at the top. The triangle that we'll never be a part of, right? That little triangle at the top for all the friends and families and acquaintances and people that are scared of, people that work for the king or queen. So he's going to take all the people and they're all going to work for the little triangle at the top, the little tiny one, right? He'll take the best of the fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to his servants, sycophants, whatever, little people that work for him in the little triangle. Basically, he's going to take all the good stuff, right? All the good stuff's going to get sucked up here at the top. Kind of like, what is it, like the 1% of the world or whatever, the top 1 or 2%, they have almost all the wealth, like 80% of the wealth. It's kind of crazy. But that's what we put up with, right? So he's going to take all the good stuff. He's going to keep it up there at the top in that top little triangle. He's going to take all the best of the stuff. He will then take 1/10 of your grain and of your vineyards and give it to his officers and his servants, right? But keep in mind, that little triangle only works because of the actual triangle, right? All the people down here working and things like that. And granted, the kings and queens work, but you know what I mean? Like they're all kicking up. You're all kicking up from the bottom through taxes and things like that. Taxes, tithings. Everyone's kicking up. And guess where it's all kicking up to? It's all consolidating towards the top. So you have a big base and everyone's kicking up money. And then it gets funneled all the way to the top where all the cash goes. right? All the cash, the wealth, the land, everything kind of gets squeezed into the top. So the top has, you have all this wealth that's supposed to be down here, right? But then it all gets squeezed into the top, and then there's like this bulk of wealth all the way at the top. So everything gets kicked up to the king or the queen, and the king or the queen, and then their officers and their servants. So people that are loyal to them, they're loyalists, right? He will take your male servants and female servants and the best of your young men and your donkeys and put them to his work. Basically, he or she's going to take all your stuff, right? You're going to kick up to the top. They're going to sit up there and live in their palaces and their, luxurious homes and mansions and beautiful furniture and their fridges, multiple fridges that are just full of food and all the water you could possibly want. They're going to have everything, right? They're going to live like kings and queens with their little hats on. They're going to have their little crowns on or tiaras or whatever, right? They're going to be living really well. Don't worry. Don't worry about them. They're good. He will take, yep. And then, he will take a tenth of your flocks and you shall be his slaves. His or her slaves, right? Yeah. So basically, everyone's kicking up in the triangle. Everyone kicks up to the top. 10%. They're all kicking up. And then it all gets consolidated. All that wealth gets consolidated right at the top. But don't worry, they're going to be doing great. Even though you might be starving, right? Or you're drinking out of a puddle, whatever, right? Don't worry. Kings and queens, they're good to go. They'll be fine. And in that day you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. So God will give you what you want, even though you shouldn't have it. But if you cry long enough, you'll get what you want. But unfortunately, you may realize later it's not what you want. You might get that king or queen that you wanted, just like the Israelites did. But he's saying, look out, because greed is going to take over. They're going to become greedy because that's one of the easiest sins that we fall into, right? Most of these leaders, they love power. They love all the toys that they get to collect because of that power. And the greed they soak in it. They soak in that greed. And then they see the other kings and queens who are also greedy and they see how much stuff they have. And then it makes them even more envious, right? And they lust after it. They get envious of all the greed, right? And all the stuff that the other kings and queens have. And then that stokes up their lust. They have a lust for money. They're envious, right? They're greedy. And then they all start fighting over resources because they want more stuff so they can make more money, all right? Have more zeros in their bank account, whatever. So, yeah. So he's warning them, be careful what you wish for because you just might get it. So they get the king they want. The Lord grants Israel's request, but the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, no, but there shall be a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations. So the reason they want a king and queen in contemporary times, but the reason they want a king is just because everybody else has them, right? They're not okay being different for God. They want to be like everyone else, even though God set them up, right? Got him out of Egypt, gave him Samuel. This guy was called from birth, right? His mother had problems bearing children. God granted her, children. He was the first. God granted her children because of that, right? But he was committed to God from birth. He's a Nazarite. From birth, that's it, right? You work for God, you're on the holy team. That's it. From birth, your whole life, birth to death. So, and Samuel was good in God's eyes, and Samuel has provided them guidance, as a prophet. And he also judged over him. Everything was good, right? Maybe not everything, but they were good. But they weren't happy. They wanted a king, not because they needed one. I mean, granted, he was getting older, so they were going to need like a succession plan and figure out who's going to take that role. But his sons weren't holy, right? They didn't walk in his ways. They walked in the ways of this world, right? Greed and power and lust and fame and things like that. They were worldly people. They didn't deserve to have that position because they lived like this world, right? If you live for God, you're not going to look like this place, at least today, right? It'll get fixed, but as it stands today, you don't want a leader that is like this world because this world is in rough shape, very, very bad shape. And, like I said, because of these problems right back here on this wall, have a look there, deadly sins, and then stack those up against your leader. But yeah, so they cried out because they wanted a king, not because they needed one. They just wanted to be like everybody else. They wanted to be like this world. But if you follow God as it stands today, you'll be nothing like this place, right? You won't be anything like this world. And you don't want leaders who are like this world, because this world is a mess, an absolute mess. Just look around. Look at all the wars. Look at all the violence, Look at all the greed and envy and idol worship. This place is a complete mess. So you don't want a leader that is like this world. You want a leader that emulates God as best as possible, even though we all make mistakes. But someone who actually emulates God, as best they can, right? It's a journey, right? And we all work at it every day. But, unfortunately, they wanted a king, and God's like, all right, I'll give you what you want. It's not what you need, but it's what you want. So I'll give it to you, even though, it might hurt you. And like I said, the only reason they wanted it is just to be like everyone else. They weren't okay being different. They weren't okay being set apart to be with God, right? You can be like this world and be like everyone else and be normal, right? Or you can be for God and follow in God's ways and not be an outcast, but be set apart, right? You're going to be weird. You're going to be a weird person. People are going to be like, I don't understand you because you're not like this place, right? You're very strange. You wear like clothing that's not form-fitting, like, you don't sin, like, as best you can, right? We all make little mistakes, but, you say you're sorry, you repent. You say, hey, God, I screwed up. You've seen it before. You knew it was going to happen, but I screwed up. And guess what? I'm sorry. And I won't do it again. Right? So, here we go. So he's going to give him a king, right? Because that's what they want. And that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. So they want a warrior. They want a warrior king. And when Samuel had heard all the words of the people, he repeated them in the ears of the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, okay, obey their voice and make them a king. Samuel then said to the men of Israel, go every man to his city. And then after that, they appoint Saul. And that's, we'll get into that story too. But yeah, book of Samuel is looking really good. Like I said, I was just mentally beat down after the book of Judges. The whole the whole Pentateuch and then rolling into Judges, I just had enough. I can't take any more violence at this point, although I'm sure we'll see more of it, right? But still, it's a much better book here. We're getting off to a better start. So definitely go read Samuel here if you get some time. It's a good one so far. But let's go to this video. So we'll kind of wrap this all up as best we can. God sent them a prophet, sent them Samuel, he walked in the ways of the Lord. He was guiding them, giving them guidance, trying to show them how to walk, with the Lord. Wasn't good enough. I mean, even though he had a good plan, right? He's going to let his kids take over, which gets a lot of leaders in trouble these days, right? Just because you have kids doesn't mean they're anything like you. If you're a moral leader. Now, if you're a leader that loves money and things and stuff and you want to live like this world, I'm sure your kids are just like you because they grew up around you. Right? And you're kind of a product of your environment. So when you grow up around all that greed and lust of money and things like that, and envy of other people that have more money, you're probably going to be like that. There's a really good chance because that's the environment you grew up in. So I would guess that a lot of your greedy leaders have a bunch of greedy kids too. It's not always the case. They're definitely outliers, right? But I would guess there's a lot of that out there, right? And if you look at individual examples, and you can do that for yourself. But, yeah. So hereditary leadership, like people taking over, like your kids taking over just because you were a good godly leader, your kids get to take over, that's not a thing. It doesn't work, right? That causes so many problems. Number one, you shouldn't have kings and queens because if you look at the examples that we have here, that typically doesn't work out well almost ever, right? Because the greed and the power and the luxury and the wealth, it just gets to them. It just infects you. It soaks into you and it ruins you. All right? A lot of people can't handle money. And then they get used to it. Then you start looking down on people that don't have it. It just sets up a horrible system. So unfortunately for Samuel, his kids didn't walk in his ways. I don't know how that happened. They should have. They were his kids, but who knows? Maybe he was busy, being the prophet and judging people. I don't know. But because of that, they weren't happy and they wanted a king. And God's like, hey, it's going to be bad for you. You're not going to like it. It's not going to work out well. But, if that's what you want, if you don't want to follow my advice, Okay, you can do it. That's your free will. And he warns them. And then we'll go to this one video and I'll let you go. I don't want to tie up too much of your time here. There's been a lot of coups going on in Africa, so I just found this one example because there was this one guy, like they showed this video of him like sitting in his little palace, like they all do, right? They all have tons of money. They're all good to go. They don't care that you're in the streets starving, right? That you don't have bathroom facilities, that you don't have access to water, you're drinking out of a pond, you don't have any money, you can't afford rice in some places. Like they don't care. They're sitting back in their palace laughing at you stupid poor people, right? While they sit up there with all this money and luxury, just eating grapes, in their throne and stuff like that. They don't care. But let's watch this one example and then I'll let you go. I don't want to tie up your whole day here.
It is by now a well-worn
This is in Gabon.
This, the 8th military coup in Western and Central Africa over the last 3 years.
The eighth coup or military takeover in 3 years. Can you believe that? Things are not good in Africa. I mean, hey, there's blame to go around. Things are not good in the rest of the world either. But apparently in Africa, there definitely are some issues here with the coups. So let's see what's going on.
Gabonese military officers announcing their takeover on state television.
Toutes les institutions de la République.
Institutions were dissolved, they said, borders closed, and President Ali Bongo under house arrest.
So Ali Bongo is the leader. They shut the place down. Probably the air traffic too. I don't know. They shut the place down. So military's not happy. They're taking over, which is odd because the whole power dynamic. I mean, the military is supposed to, like I said, the triangle. Then you have the little triangle up top that actually controls everything. So, and the military works for the little triangle, right? The way it's set up. So, I mean, technically they're supposed to represent the whole triangle. But in a lot of cases, that military just supports that little triangle at the top that we'll never be a part of. So, the majority of people, right? Like the 98%, we kind of work for the 2%. So, it's interesting that the military is doing the takeover because they're supposed to work for that little triangle at the top. But for whatever reason, they broke away and they're not happy. So, let's see what happens.
Where he issued a...
This is him, right? This is Ali Bongo, I think. So he's the leader. I'm not sure how long he's been in power. They might talk about that. But just look at this, right? I'm sure I could show you pictures of Gabon, right? In some of the worst areas where they're, I don't know. I'm not an expert on Gabon, but I'm sure there are some people in that nation that could use some help, right? A lot of Central African countries, other countries within Africa. There's some need there, just like all other countries too. But look at him, right? He's doing all right. Now, Ali Bongo, he's doing okay. A nice little bookshelf there. Got some cool books. Got a nice golden calf there on the shelf. That's very problematic. Gold, wealth, diamonds, luxury items. Those are all problematic. And he's got his nice little golden calf there just posted up on the bookshelf. But look at him. He's doing okay. Seems like he's fit. He's eating enough. Seems hydrated. Got some beautiful carpet there. Nice chairs. It looks very nice. He's doing okay. Seems like he's doing all right. Let's see what he's got to say.
To his friends for help.
I don't know what's going on. So
he's confused.
To make noise.
So he doesn't understand, right? He doesn't understand why the military is taking over and why they're not happy with him, and he wants people to make noise. I don't know what that means, but I guess he wants people to fight for him or something. But let's see.
Make noise. Really.
Make noise.
I'm thanking you.
Many people did make noise.
There they go. They're making noise for you, Ali.
But in celebration. Thanks to the army, thanks to
They're making noise for you, buddy.
Man. We're liberated, shouted another.
Look how happy they are. So I don't know this guy. I don't know a lot about him, but all I know is a certain portion of his people are very happy that he's out of power. So that makes me wonder, what that leadership was like, and how long he's been in office, and how many of his little tight circle have been in power, and what they've been imposing on people, and things like that. But these people, at least the small group of people that they're showing in these videos, seem extremely happy. They are making noise for you.
Bongo's reign is over.
Over.
Part of a family dynasty in power.
Ooh, there's the problem right there. Family dynasty, hereditary leadership. So this guy's probably been in power for a long time. Him, his family, his close entourage, cousins, whatever. You take care of your little triangle and you don't care about the rest of the triangle. Family dynasty. that gets very, very problematic. Because then they concentrate all that wealth and they just want to protect it, right?
Over 50 years, Bongo was just declared the winner of elections analysts say many people suspect were rigged.
Wow. If anybody could rig an election, a family dynasty could. They've been in power for, what did they say, 50 years or something? Let's see.
Many people suspect were rigged.
Hold on.
Winner of elections analysts.
Let's back it up.
Part of a family dynasty in power for over 50 years.
Oh, wow. So 50 years. So 50 years. He's had time to concentrate all that power, right? All those assets being kicked up to the top and consolidated in. Just consolidating all those assets toward the top. So he's been in power 50 years, him or his family. So he's had time to like set up arrangements with people and get dirt on people and have people that owe him favors, things like that. 50 years, him or his family, I don't know. That's a long time, right? To be able to get hooks into people and to make sure they do your bidding, right? You got a hook in this person, hook in this person. You owe me this, I know this about you. Right? You get dirt on people. So he's had control over this country, him or his family, for like 50 years. So that country is a direct result of his family's leadership. Because with 50 years, what can you possibly say? Like, oh, I didn't have time to fix it. I only had 50 years. I didn't have time to fix it. So be very careful with family dynasties, right? Just like Samuel as an example, right? His kids weren't worthy of the job. They were greedy, right? They did things, they perverted justice, right? Those aren't the people you want in power. You have to get those people out of power or you're never going to fix this place.
Bongo was just declared the winner of elections.
Just declared the winner.
Say many people suspect were rigged.
And they've welcomed.
Right. So he probably rigged it in some way or some fashion, right? I don't know the guy, right? I don't know him. I don't know how it would have happened, but I'm sure if you're in power 50 years and you don't have any ethical boundaries and you just want to do whatever you want to, whatever is right in your eyes, and you don't care about lying and stealing and stomping on people, I'm sure you can rig an election if you wanted to.
That's if the election had been credible, that perhaps that reaction would have been different.
Right. So the people knew. They knew that election wasn't credible. Per them, I don't live there. I'm not an expert. But the people don't think it was credible. And that gentleman definitely has questions too.
Gabon is rich in oil and minerals, but that wealth hasn't trickled down to the hands of ordinary people.
Right. So it's a resource trap. What do they say they have? Oil and...
Trickled down to the hands of ordinary people.
Oh, hold on.
And oil and minerals. Gabon is rich in oil and minerals, but that...
Oil and minerals. So they're rich in oil and minerals, right? So it's kind of a resource trap. The country itself has a lot of money, right? They have a lot of things that other countries want, like a lot of rich Western countries, things like that. Other countries, people that have money, they have resources, but, it doesn't exactly trickle down. That money for those resources, oil and minerals and all that, where do you think it goes? Do you think it goes to the entire triangle? No, of course not. Because the little triangle, guess who the little triangle cares about? The little triangle. You ever been to Egypt and you see that one little stone area they got on the top, right? That's where everything is concentrated. They take all the wealth and everything and they squeeze it all up to the top and they concentrate everything right to the tip, right? So Gabon, he's only worried about his little triangle. So all that money, all that assets they have, the minerals and the oil and whatever it is they have, their exports, all that money just goes to the top. They don't care about the people at the bottom or the middle top. They don't care. All they want to do is stay in power, right? And this doesn't appear like the best democracy in the world either, because you can rig elections. So if you can rig elections and you got all this money and you got all this power consolidated through a family dynasty, right? Hereditary leadership and all their little friends and stuff, they don't care about you. They're just going to sit there and get fat and rich. They're just going to make all their money. And they're going to consolidate it all at the top. And they don't care about you, right? All these people down, they don't care. That's what you get with a family dynasty and with a resource trap, where you have all these minerals and assets. but you might get taken advantage of in those contracts that you have because they're dealing with someone who's greedy at the top, right? So if you're a Western country and you come in and you want to deal with Gabon or some other country, right? The Gabonese, you want to deal with them, right? You come in and you find some leader who's greedy, right? At the very top, you find some leader and you come down and you sit down with a contract and say, hey, I'm going to give you X amount of dollars, whatever, for these assets, for this period of time, however they book those contracts. But it's a terrible contract. But guess what? The person in power could care less because the person at the top of the triangle in that country is only concerned with the very top of the triangle. So when you're thinking about the triangle of your population, right, and all you care about is the very tip, if that contract only benefits the very tip of the triangle, that's all they're going to care about. You need a leader when they're supposed to be leading your country. You need a leader that's worried about the entire triangle. Everyone, everybody there, from the lowliest people to whatever untouchable class or whatever stupid concept you want to think of. But from the lowliest people to the homeless to the beggars, everyone, right? They're all important in God's eyes. God created all of us. So God cares about the entire triangle. God doesn't care only about the people at the very top, that little baby triangle at the top, the real tiny one. God cares about them too, but God cares about all of us, every single one of us. So if you have a leader that's only concerned with the top, you need to boot that leader out on their very comfortable behinds, right? And take your country back, because that's the only way we're going to fix this place. If you have a leader who is only concerned with the tip of the triangle of the population, you have a serious problem. They have greed issues. There's a lot of nepotism involved there, right? They're not living in the ways of the Lord. God cares about everyone, not just the people at the top. So if your leaders only care about people at the top, you need to boot them out, right? And that's why these people are happy, because these Gabonese folks, they realize that this guy's been sitting up there, either him or his family, I'm not sure, for 50 years, enriching themselves, engorging themselves, sitting around just in their thrones, just eating grapes, doing whatever they want to do, right? They're happy, they're comfortable. People are very unhappy in the streets, so I'm sure some folks here are poor or need access to water and who knows, facilities like restroom facilities, food, I don't know. But it's one of those resource-trapped countries, right? They have assets. They have things they can make money on. They have exports that other countries want, but they book silly deals with these countries because the people at the top are greedy, and the other countries dealing with them know it. It's so easy to deal with a greedy leader. It's easy. Because if you have someone who's greedy, you realize they're going to book that deal in a way that only benefits a few people. That's easy. That's cheap. For another country, that's cheap. Stroke them off, 100 million, a billion, whatever. But if that person's booking a contract that's going to benefit everyone in the country, it's going to be a lot more expensive to get those assets, right? It's going to cost them a lot more money because the leaders, the greedy ones, they don't realize what it's worth or they don't care, right? They're not going to book a deal and fight to get a really good deal that benefits everyone. They're just going to book that deal to take care of that tiny, very tiny triangle at the top. So it's easy for other countries to come in and book great contracts against you because they realize you're greedy. And you're not worried about your people, your constituents. You're only worried about yourself. So that's very cheap for other countries to deal with you like that.
Wealth hasn't trickled down to the hands of ordinary people. Gabon's former colony.
Because the people booking the deals don't care about the ordinary people. That's why. And that's why other countries love dealing with you. It's so easy. You make it so cheap.
France has condemned the coup. France reaffirmed.
Well, I wonder why France would condemn the coup. If you had to guess, like I said, it's a resource-trapped country. So some country, I don't know which ones, I'm sure multiple countries, but some countries are going to have deals with these countries, with African countries, that are extremely unfair. To go in there and rip out all the resources, right? Strip them out, take them back to their country so they can make money off of them. And very one-sided contracts, very one-sided deals, because some countries, whichever ones those are, knew that they were dealing with greedy leaders that only cared about taking care of themselves. So those deals were easy to book. They're cheap. Doesn't benefit the entire population, but hey, your African leaders didn't care. The other countries dealing with you certainly don't care. So those deals got booked.
Its wish for the election results, once known, to be respected, says this government spokesman.
Respected.
And
Those horrible deals where you took advantage of these people because you were dealing with an essentially greedy, evil person at the top who didn't care about their people.
French sentiment has grown, not just in Gabon, but in other former French colonies where
Oh, that's
military
true.
juntas now rule.
Yeah, there were other French countries that were like Nigeria, I think, same thing. Yeah, so I don't know what's going on with France, but apparently they got in there and booked some very luxurious deals that benefit France very much, and not so much those African countries. Per the people of Africa, I'm not the expert. Go look it up for yourself, but from what I'm seeing, France booked some very good deals in Africa that are quite one-sided, that benefit France a lot, and not so much Africa. Or at least it benefits Africa, but it only benefits maybe the couple of percentage points at the top in that very tiny triangle and doesn't do anything for those people at the bottom. And I'm sure they would argue that, well, that's the deal they booked. Yeah, that's true. But at some point you have to correct the problem, right? You need those assets, those resources from Africa to take care of the African people, the entire population, not just the few percent in that little triangle at the top where the king or queen sits and takes care of all the people that support the king or queen. So, they need to get deals booked that actually benefit the entire country they're in, not just the folks at the top. So be very careful with hereditary leadership. Be very careful with greedy leaders, of which there are many, and that problem will get corrected. But that's it for today. So I just figured I would go into that because I was going through the book of Samuel, and then you got all this stuff going on in Africa, so it just kind of tied in nicely. So definitely go check that book out if you get a second. I don't agree with everything in there. There's lots of animal sacrifice and other things I don't agree with, but on the big stuff we'll agree, right? What we just talked about, his concerns about hereditary leadership, God giving direction. This is what you need. Well, this is what I want. I don't want to go God's way. I want to go my own way, and things that can happen because of that, which God already sees, but God will let us do because, hey, we've got free will. That's one thing we have. Free will doesn't always work out for us. Unfortunately, it becomes a snare, right, for us. But that's how it's designed, so that we'll learn. So the key is to learn quickly and retain those lessons so that life and your journey gets much easier. But that's it for today. So hope everything goes well. We're definitely going through trying times. That's not going to stop. We're going to be in this for many years. So just stick tight, God wants to walk with us through these troubling times, wants to help us so that we can take care of ourselves, the people, protect our souls, protect the animals, protect the planets, protect everything, protect all of God's creations. So we're going to get this house back in order, but it's going to take a little time. The quicker we learn, the quicker it'll go. So we'll see how long it takes. That's based on us and how long we want to fight God. So that's it. Just remember, God loves you and wants to provide guidance. So go out there and have a great week, and we'll talk next time.